Ciao, my name is Alessandro and today we're gonna be playing Too Many Bones, a dice builder RPG. I'm actually cheating because this is just the lid. The game is pretty heavy, so... Today we will be learning how to play Too Many Bones in the first section of this video, where I will explain most of the rules, while a more in-depth view into the combat and how the combat works will be left in the second section of this video, which is the playthrough. You can jump around to the relative section of this video using the timestamps in the description below or in the chapter of this video. Before we start, I want to remind you that if I make a mistake, that will be corrected in the subtitles at the Klingon channel, so feel free to turn that on. And if you like Too Many Bones, or in general you like board games, feel free to leave a like to this video, subscribe to my channel, and I promise many more playthroughs and yapping about board games is gonna come to this channel. As I said, I created this video to be very beginner friendly, and that is why we're gonna have an how to play with most of the rules in the first section, and we're gonna dive deeper into a lot of details, a lot of nuances of this game and the combat in the playthrough. Also, for the sake of keeping it beginner friendly, today we're gonna have a patches, which is one of the simplest Gearloc to handle, against Nom, which is the shortest Tyrant, and you're gonna understand what this means while we dive deeper into the rules of this game. But just so you know, I wanted to keep this video as short as possible because Too Many Bones can be a game that drags very long, and as simple as possible, just as an introduction. In a way, while I think this is the best entry point for new players, I also think this doesn't do too much justice to the game, because the game really shines with tyrants that allow you to have longer playthroughs, gaining more training points that are gonna help your Gearloc develop more and more skill and have more personalization. But don't worry, because more advanced playthrough with more advanced characters are gonna soon come to my channel. I already recorded a Marrow vs Tantrum playthrough, so that more advanced players have something to look forward to. As I said, this game can sometimes drag a little bit long, that's why I decided to divide this video into two parts. Today we're gonna have the how to play plus the playthrough of day 1 to day 4, and I think this will give you a great overview of how the game works and most of the rules of the game, so it should be enough for you. But I kinda think you should also watch part 2, because we will have the Tyrant battle there. And what's Too Many Bones without a Tyrant battle? I will leave the link to part 2 in the description below, but also at the end of this video. But now let's jump straight into the how to play. And we're all set to start learning to play Too Many Bones. Now we're gonna have an overview of the rules of this game. I'm gonna try to teach you the most general guidelines to give you an idea of how everything works, but like the details of a lot of things like baddie keywords or like all the dice of like our Gearloc are gonna be explained later. And the reason is that Too Many Bones is a simple game in its structure and how it works, but it gets very complex when it comes to like special baddies abilities, and our baddies are our enemies, but also like the build of our Gearloc, which is like all the skill dice of our Gearloc. In this game, the enemies are called baddies, and we have different type of baddies that I have here. Plus we have our Tyrant, which is our big boss, and then our characters, the characters that we're playing as, are called Gearlocs. So Patches is gonna be our Gearloc of the day, while Nom is going to be our Tyrant. The base game comes with 4 different Gearlocs and 7 different Tyrants, so a lot of replayability there. And the reason why I chose Patches and Nom are very simple. Patches is our simplest Gearloc to play, to understand, but also as a solo complexity illustrated by the guidelines. And Nom is, let's say, the fastest Tyrant to fight. You're gonna see what this means in a second after I explain you how the game works generally as a structure. This doesn't mean that Nom is the easiest to fight at all, but since this game can get pretty long, I wanted you to experience like the shortest possible experience, because I also need to explain what I'm doing while I'm doing it in this video. I want to start by saying that this video is going to be mostly for people who don't know how to play. If you know how to play, you can still watch this video, you can skip all this introduction, but keep in mind that I'm going to be explaining a lot of the things as I go, even during the playthrough. If you're an expert already in Too Many Bones, don't worry, I'm gonna make more videos with playthroughs where I don't go through every single thing that I do, so it's gonna be more easily, more expert friendly. And if they're already out, you're gonna find the playlist showing right now at the top right corner of the screen or in the description below. So let's start by talking about what is the objective of the game. The objective of the game is defeating our tyrant, in this case Nom. There are going to be different fight encounters in the game, and this is going to be our battle mat, and we're gonna see how the fight actually works a little bit better in detail during the actual playthrough. So what are the requirements to fight our tyrant? So the requirements to fight our tyrant are written on the encounter card for the tyrant. This is called the encounter card. This is going to be the baddie chip, which by the way has a different side that has all the stats of our enemy. And this is going to be his special die that is gonna roll whenever he attacks us. But all of these you're gonna understand a little bit later. Now let's just look at the encounter card. So each tyrant encounter card on the front face has the name of the tyrant, an image, some flavor text, which is everything that you can read here, which we're gonna read once we get to face Nom. Hopefully we get to face Nom, because that's not a given. Sometimes you might end the game without ever facing the tyrant. And now I'm gonna explain you why. As you can see, there are these two numbers on the right side of our tyrant card. The first number on the top, the one that now shows a 6, is called progress points. That is the progress points requirement to be able to fight Nom. So you can only fight Nom once you have acquired 6 progress points throughout your game. The bottom number, the number 8, is the number of days that you have to actually fight and defeat Nom. This means that you have a maximum of 8 days, and that's gonna be our timer, to be able to actually defeat Nom. If you need to go into the 9th day, and we're gonna see what this means, it means that you lost the game. On the very bottom of the card, I know it's pretty hard to see, but there is written game length, and it shows a 1 out of 6. And this is why I chose Nom. This is the shortest game length tyrant in the base box. On the bottom left corner of the tyrant card, you can see 3 icons. These 3 icons are gonna tell you which type of baddies you're gonna use for this game. In the base box, which is the one that we're using, we have different type of baddies. And each baddie has its class, let's say, and for each tyrant is gonna be specified which baddie you're actually gonna use for that tyrant. And this is part of the setup. So let's talk a little bit about the setup. The setup is not that complicated, because you just choose a tyrant, in this case Nom, then you take all the baddies that correspond to these symbols here at the bottom left corner of the card of the tyrant, and you place them in your baddie queues. So as you can see here, I have 3 queues of baddies. So the 3 queues that I mentioned before are not divided by the symbols that I've shown you on the tyrant card, but they're actually divided by the amount of baddie points. There are 3 different values, at least in the base game, of baddie points. We have 1 baddie point, 5 baddie points, and 20 baddie points baddies. We're gonna see what this means a little bit later when we start fighting and we start diving into the game. But just so you know, you take all the 1, 5, and 20 baddie points corresponding to the symbols on the tyrant card that I showed you before, and you shuffle them in 3 piles and create your baddie queues. Also part of the setup is to take the tyrant chip and its tyrant die. But this is basically going to be the chip that corresponds to the tyrant that has all the stats behind, as I said before, and this is going to be a special die that the tyrant rolls in battle. This is going to be our day counter, so a way to count the days that go on. And remember that we have maximum 8 days to actually kill Nom. You take your Gearloc mat and it's empty. As you can see, there's nothing on the Gearloc mat. You take your Gearloc initiative die, so each Gearloc has its own special die. You take the Gearloc chip and then you create your encounter deck. The encounter deck is just a deck of cards that is created by different kind of cards. So the first card that you see on top is just a card to actually hide what is coming up next. But then we have 3 different kind of cards. We have the starting encounters, so we have 3 special encounters that are gonna be always the same for the first 3 days. So the first 3 encounters we're gonna have are always gonna be the same. And the reason why it was studied like this is to help you build your Gearloc before actually getting into more difficult encounters. Then you will have a certain number of normal encounters, in this case is 5. And the reason why it's 5 is that we have a maximum amount of days that is 8 to fight Nom. And the first 3 encounters, which are gonna be our first 3 days, are gonna be these special encounters. So you basically take the amount of days equal to the number of maximum days to fight Nom minus 3. So 3 plus 5, 8. Then each tyrant can have their own special tyrant encounter or tyrant special encounters. In this case, Nom only has a special tyrant encounter. And what you do is combining the tyrant encounter with all the normal encounters, shuffle all of them together, and then place them on the bottom of the 3 initial special encounters. Now keep in mind that we're playing solo, and the solo mode has the same special starting 3 encounters, the same tyrant encounters of the multiplayer mode, but all the normal encounter cards are specifically designed for solo, and you can see it here. It says base set solo 011. So as I said, I have shuffled all the encounter cards together. So the first normal encounters with the tyrant encounter placed at the bottom, the 3 special encounters in a sequence, because they have 1, 2, 3, they have a specific sequence on the top, and now we're gonna place the cover on top. This is going to be off screen because I want you to be able to see all the important stuff, but just so you know, this is how you build this deck. And this is the whole setup, because you just shuffled the loot, the trove loot, which are 2 different kind of loots, and you play with all of them. You don't have to select anything there. Now, we have talked about having a maximum of 8 days, but let's talk about how does each day work. Each day starts with increasing the day counter. So as you can see, we're gonna start from day 1 in this case. So this is going to be day 1, and then you're gonna draw one of the encounters from the encounter deck. Now, I'm not gonna draw from our deck right now, but I'm gonna show you a little bit of encounters so you can see that there are different kind of options. So on the front of an encounter card, there is some flavored text, but on the back of each encounter card, you can see different options most of the times. Sometimes you just have one option, but sometimes you have a choice to make. Actually, most of the time you're gonna have a choice to make. So as you can see on the left, we have 2 choices, the top choice and the bottom choice. And from this symbol here, you're gonna see that these are both combat encounters. Each combat encounters has special rules, and we're gonna understand the rules of each encounter once we play, so I'm not gonna read that right now and explain you what it means. But generally, combat encounters involve fighting baddies on the battle map, and your criteria for success is going to be killing every single one of the baddies in the baddie queue. The baddie queue is going to be all the baddies that you are gonna have to fight, and each encounter are gonna tell you how to build your baddie queue, and you can never have more than 4 baddies at a time on the mat. So you're gonna be fighting at most 4 baddies at a time. Once a baddie is killed, a new one comes from the baddie queue at the end of the combat round. But we're gonna see these more in detail during the playthrough, as I said. Now let's discuss about all these symbols on the card. If you successfully complete the encounter, which, as I said, for a combat encounter is killing all the baddies in the baddie queue, you're gonna get some reward during the reward phase of the day. So after resolving the encounter, the next phase for each day is going to be the reward phase, where you're gonna check if you're successful. And if you are, you're gonna gain these rewards. The rewards at the bottom of the card are for both of the choices. So it doesn't matter which choice you make, if you're successful, you're gonna get what is at the bottom of the card. In this case, this is going to be 2 progress points, which, remember, you need to get a certain amount of progress points to fight the Tyrant. So this is the way to acquire progress points. And then these 2 symbols are going to be training points, and we're gonna talk about the training points very soon. This symbol means a loot for each Gearloc, so in this case it's only 1 loot, but if we were playing with multiple players, each player would draw a loot from the loot deck. And keep in mind, this is normal loot because it's a black icon and it's not a trove loot. Then depending on the choice you made, you're also gonna get more rewards. So as you can see, the top reward here has 2 more rewards. One is, again, a loot for each player, but this time, since the icon is purple, that is going to be a trove loot, which is usually a better kind of loot, but you need to unlock by lockpicking, which is going to be another phase during the day that we're gonna discuss later. And the first choice also gives you another training point. The bottom choice is only gonna give you an extra training point. So example, if you're successful and you chose the top option, you're gonna get 2 progress points, 3 training points, 1 loot and 1 trove loot each. If you chose the bottom option, you're only gonna get 2 progress points, 3 training points and 1 loot each. On the right, we can see another type of encounter, and in this case, we have peaceful encounters, as you can see from this icon. So these encounters don't usually involve a combat, or if they involve a combat, it's a special type of combat. And sometimes these peaceful encounters can be dexterity games or some sort of mini games, or not even games at all, just choose that and do nothing and get the reward and so on. So it really depends on what the encounter entails, but we're hopefully gonna see something like this during the playthrough. In this case, the top option is going to give you 1 progress point and 1 training point. And by the way, when I say 1 training point, I mean 1 training point for each Gearloc. So if you're playing multiplayer, each player is going to get 1 training point for their Gearlocs. And the bottom option is going to give you 1 progress point and then a certain amount of loot. As you can see, there's a question mark, and probably the question mark explanation is going to be in the text of the encounter. And that's all. So you draw an encounter, you resolve the encounter, and if you're successful during the encounter, you're gonna get the rewards. I took some multiplayer kind of encounters to show you, so that's why you may see when it says like 1 loot for each Gearloc and so on. After the rewards phase, there is the recovery phase. And during the recovery phase, you're gonna do 3 main things in the order that you decide. The first thing is loot trading. So if you're playing multiplayer, you can trade loot with the other players in the way you want. Then you have lockpicking. As I said, there are 2 different types of loot, the normal loot and the trove loot. And to be able to get the trove loot, you need to unlock the trove loot. And how you do that is by lockpicking. I'm not gonna go into the details of lockpicking right now. Hopefully we're gonna see it in this playthrough or in future playthroughs. It's very complicated to explain by words. It's very easy to understand when you actually do it. The third thing that you can do during your recovery phase is choosing between 3 options. The first option is rest and recovery, which means you gain back all the health of your Gearloc. Your Gearloc is gonna have a certain amount of health depending on what is its health stat. In this case, for patches is 5, and then there is a plus, and that depends on which number is gonna be written here. So we're gonna start with a 5 health. If patches were to lose health during a combat, one of the ways to recover is using the rest and recovery option during his recovery phase, and is going to gain back all its health. And by the way, health is tracked by these chips at the bottom of each character chip, so that's also how we track the baddies' health. The second option is searching for better loot. So in total, each Gearloc has 4 loot slots, so you can never have more than 4 loot. Searching for better loot means that you need to discard one of the loot that you have to try and search for better loot. How you do that is pretty simple. You take 6 attack dice, and this is a way to introduce you to the attack dice. Attack dice are these kind of dice that have 1 side with a 2 attack, 4 sides with a 1 attack, and 1 side with a bone. So you have 1 in 6 chances of drawing a bone, 1 in 6 chances of getting a 2 attack. So you take 6 of these dice and you roll them, and you draw an amount of loot cards depending on the amount of bones that you rolled. So in this case, I would draw 2 loot cards, and I will only be able to keep 1. This is how you search for better loot. If you had no bones whatsoever, then it means that you just lost the loot that you discarded to search for better loot, and you unfortunately didn't find any better loot. The third option that you have for the recovery phase is going to be scouting the area. And scouting the area means just preparing for what's coming next. The way you do that is rolling a d6. You roll it, and depending on the result, you can look at the top of some baddie queues. Actually, these are called baddie stacks because the baddie queue is the one that you're gonna fight. So if you roll between 1 and 3, you're gonna be looking at the top of the stack of the 1 baddie points. If you roll between 1 and 5, you can choose between the stack of 1 or 5 baddie points. If you roll a 6, you can look even at the 20 points baddie stack. So in this case, we rolled the 4. I don't know if you can see it very well because this is kind of a translucent die, but I could have the choice to look either at the top of the stack 1 or 5 baddie points. And what I do after looking at the baddie there, I can choose to keep it at the top of the stack or placing it at the bottom of the stack. And this is the third and final individual option that you have. So as I said, you choose one between recovery, scouting the area, or searching for better loot. Once this recovery phase has ended, you just go into a new day and you go on like this until you reach the amount of progress points that are actually gonna allow you to fight your Tyrant. Once you have reached the amount of progress points that are required by your Tyrant, you have the choice to either go on and draw an encounter card during the first phase of the day, or you can go into the Tyrant fight, which is basically the fight encounter that is written on the back of the Tyrant card. After you go into the Tyrant fight, if you actually win the Tyrant fight, you won the game. If you lost the Tyrant fight, you can try the Tyrant fight again and again and again until you reach the amount of maximum days that you have available for this Tyrant. So Nom has a requirement of 6 progress points and 8 days. Suppose we get 6 progress points by day 5, and during day 6 we decide to go into the Tyrant fight. We will have day 6, day 7 and day 8 to try and kill the Tyrant. So we have basically 3 attempts at the same fight to be able to kill Nom. And this is how the game works. I just want to talk to you about training points and then we can start playing. Training points is the true core and the most fun part of this game in my opinion. So there are different ways to spend your training points. So the first and more basic way to spend your training points is increasing your health stat. What you do is just spending 1 training point and increasing by 1 the health stat. And how you do that is just basically placing a die with a 1 when you first gain an increase in health. And then from then onwards you can just roll it up to a 2, 3, 4, 5 and 6. Whenever you gain a health stat increase, you actually gain a health chip immediately under your Gearloc. The second way that you can spend your training points is going to be increasing your dexterity. As you can see, Patches has a starting dexterity of 2, and I can increase it by spending training points accordingly. Dexterity is going to indicate the amount of dice that each Gearloc can roll at maximum during each combat round. There are 3 types of dice. There are attack dice, defense dice, and skill dice. So if you have a dexterity of 3, you're gonna be able to roll maximum 3 dice in between a choice of attack, defense, and skill dice according to your attack and defense skills, plus the skill dice that you have available. We're gonna see what this means. If you didn't understand it now, don't worry. Dexterity is also gonna allow your Gearloc to move on the battle mat. So during the beginning of the fight of a combat, your Gearloc is gonna be able to be placed in one of the spots according to its melee or ranged indicator. So in this case, Patches is a melee, so it can be placed in one of the melee spots. And to be able to attack a baddie on the baddie mat, it means that Patches needs to be adjacent to one of the baddies. Keep in mind, diagonals are not adjacency. So Patches would be able to attack one of the baddies in one of these positions. But then, how do you move on this battle mat? Well, you spend dexterity. So you have a maximum of 3 dexterity, which means each combat round, Patches is gonna be able to move maximum up to 3 spaces, okay? The problem is that if Patches actually moves 3 spaces, then it has no dexterity left to be able to roll any dice. Suppose instead that Patches would only move 1 space, then Patches would have 2 dexterity left to be able to roll up to 2 dice during the roll phase of his combat turn. So dexterity is really to roll dice and move on the battle mat. Then we have attack. Attack is another way that you can spend training points. While for health and dexterity you can just spend the training point and you don't have to check anything, for the attack and defense skills you need to make a training attempt. And how you do that is basically you take the amount of dice of the attack that you have currently. So in this case, I only have to roll 1 attack die. But if I was already at a level of 3 attack, I would have to roll 3 dice, for example. And the dice that I'm gonna roll are attack dice. And basically, I check if I have no bones. If I have no bones, the training attempt is successful. In this case, I had a bone, so this training attempt is not successful and I'm not allowed to train attack and increase attack. Which means this training point that I wanted to spend on attack, I have to spend it on something else. If the training attempt was actually successful, which means I had no bones, I would actually be able to successfully increase my attack stat from 2 to 3 in this case. The same concept is valid for defense. So suppose I have a defense of 3 already, it means that I'm gonna have to roll 3 defense dice and make a very similar check. Now the difference between the attack dice and the defense dice is that the attack die has only 1 bone, while the defense dice has 2 bone sides. So the defense die has a 2 side, then it has 3 1 sides and 2 bone sides. So let's make a defense training attempt. That's pretty bad. 3 bones. Now, since it is more likely on the defense die to roll bones, you actually have the possibility of rerolling once each of the dice with a bone. So just for the sake of making an example, let's suppose this was not a bone, I have the attempt of rerolling these 2 dice once and do the attempt again. Since I successfully got no bones on my second roll, I'm actually allowed to increase my defense stat. And this is how you train attack and defense. The attack and defense stat are gonna indicate the maximum amount of attack and defense dice you can roll on each combat turn. So remember, if I have a dexterity of 3, even if I have an attack stat of 4 and I have a defense stat of 4, I cannot roll 4 attack dice and 4 defense dice, but I can roll any combination of these dice to a maximum of 3 dice. So I could roll 1 attack to defense, or 2 attack, 1 defense, or even 3 attack, no defense, and so on. So it is very important to keep training your dexterity and not only focusing on attack and defense, because you might end up in the situation where you don't have enough dexterity to roll the amount of dice that you actually trained for attack and defense. And now let's come to the core of the personalization of your Gearloc, your skill dice. Skill dice are dice that you can train for your Gearloc, and each Gearloc has different training paths. So in this case, Patches has 3 skills paths. The first is Combat Medic, which is the red one. Then we have the green one, which is called Forester. And then we have the blue Steam Stacker. We also have this yellow line here that we're gonna discuss in a second. Now, each skill die has a very unique set of abilities. So I'm not gonna go through all the skill dice for each Gearloc, or for Patches in this case, because that would take like 15 hours and you're probably not gonna understand what it means. So what I'm going to tell you is that to train one of these skills, you need to start from a star spot. As you can see, the red path has 1 star spot, so you need to get this die first if you want to train on the red path. After that, there is an arrow. So from Medkit, you need to get Fast Hands, and then once you got Fast Hands, you can choose to get Bonesaw or Medpack. And to get Zappack, you actually have to have trained Medkit, Fast Hands, Medpack, and then you're only gonna be able to get Zappack once you have trained these 3 skills first. The green path is more forgiving, so you can get either nutrients or toxins because they both have a star, and in this case you don't have a sequence of skills to get. The third path is this blue path, and it's the same, so you need to start from Steam Kit because it has the star, and then you can basically branch however you want following the arrows. So in order to get Chain Reactor, you need to have Steam Belt and Steam Kit, and that is going to give you the possibility of getting Steam Lethal. And this is basically how it works. Now, as you can see, there are these 3 spots for yellow dice, which are called consumables. To make you understand the difference between consumables and skill dice, I need to talk to you about exhausting dice. So once you roll a skill die during a combat, that die is most likely to get exhausted. Each die has different rules, so it might not get exhausted depending on the rules of the dice, but as a general rule, skill dice are usually getting exhausted. Which means once you use them, they're not available for the rest of the combat to be used again. But at the end of the combat, you're gonna refresh all the exhausted dice and place them back on your skill matrix. And this is the difference with consumables. Once you have used the consumable die, which is one of these 3 dice for Patches, that die is not gonna get exhausted, it's actually gonna go back to the supply for Patches to be purchased again later. And another difference is that consumable dice cannot be purchased with training points, but they need to be purchased with something called a Fortunate Discovery. Now, Fortunate Discoveries are special cards in the loot deck, and that is generally how you acquire Fortunate Discovery, but Patches also has the possibility of getting a Fortunate Discovery using its backup plan. And what better time to talk about the backup plan? Before we go into the backup plan, I just want to specify once again that if you roll attack and defense dice, they're not gonna get exhausted, unless there are special abilities of the baddies that exhaust your attack and defense dice. But generally, attack and defense dice are not exhausted once rolled, and generally skill dice are exhausted once used. As we have seen, both attack and defense dice have bone sides on them, and also skill dice can have bones on them. And once you roll bones, they're not wasted, like they are misses. Yes, you don't get the benefit of the defense, of the attack, or of the skill die. But you can decide to place these bones on your backup plan. So once you get bones, you're actually gonna place them in your backup plan if you want. Remember, this is your choice. And under each Gearloc backup plan, you can have different abilities, and each Gearloc has its special backup plan abilities. Once per combat round, you can choose to spend the amount of dice equal to that backup plan ability to use that backup plan ability. So suppose that I had actually 4 dice and I wanted to use the needle jab that only costs 3 bones. I will spend 3 bones and I will keep 1 to perform a needle jab. What this means we're gonna see once we play. Now, one important thing to note is that if you're using a skill die in your backup plan and you're actually using the die to perform one of the abilities, this die is not gonna go back into your skill matrix, but it's actually gonna get exhausted. So it's not that common to use skill dice in your backup plan, even though there are some skill dice that might have multiple bones. In this case, there are 2 bones on a single face of the die, and that might be useful to trigger something very powerful in your backup plan. One thing I want to mention is that if you get to 6 bones, you're gonna get to be able to evolve your Gearloc to its innate +1. So each Gearloc has an innate ability. For patches is recovery, and an innate +1 ability, which is for patches major recovery. Now, patches innate ability means that at the start of each turn, patches is gonna be able to heal for 1. Patches is a medic. This is very thematic. He's gonna heal himself. If patches ever gets to collect at least 6 bones in its backup plan, it can spend all the 6 bones to evolve into its innate +1, and how you signal that is just flipping patches over. And how we can distinguish if it has its innate or innate +1 ability is that with its innate +1 is gonna have stars all around the character chip. Now, once you unlock the innate +1 for a character, it's gonna stay there for the rest of the game. So you only unlock the innate +1 once, and then you keep having the innate +1 ability for the rest of the game. Patches innate +1 is gonna allow him to immediately get 1 more health stat, so increase its health stat by 1, so it would go from 2 to 3 immediately. And if you remember, its recovery allowed Patches to heal himself for 1 at the start of each round, while its innate +1 allows Patches to heal whichever Gearloc at the beginning of its combat turn. In this case, it doesn't matter because we're playing solo, but it would matter in case we were playing multiplayer. Now, the very last thing I want to mention is about loot, and then we can start playing as well. Loot can be of different types. As you can see, there are single-use loot, which means once you use it, you discard it. Permanent kind of loot, which means that you keep it and keep on using it until you decide to actually discard it or something makes you discard it. And then there is multiple uses loot, like Ogot herbs. In this case, it has 3 uses. And what you do in this case is basically whenever you use the Ogot's herbs, as you can see, there's a counter up here. So the first use, you're gonna move it to 2. The second use, you're gonna move it to 1. And then when there is only 1 use left and you use the last use, you discard the card. One thing also I want to mention is that each loot takes only 1 spot unless it is a heavy loot. In this case, it would take 3 loot spots. And remember, you only have 4 in total. Now, this was a lot of information and there's gonna be much more to come, but I think I gave you a good overview of how Too Many Bones is played. We're gonna see all the details as we play. So I'm gonna prepare the field for our first game of Too Many Bones, Patches versus Gnome. So we're all set for our first game of Too Many Bones. I removed the baddie stacks from the screen because I want you to be able to see as much as possible and not clutter too much the play area. And today we're gonna be playing in heroic mode. So there are 3 different modes that you can play Too Many Bones, but also you can make your own rules. There is Adventurer, which we're never gonna play as because it's a very beginner friendly kind of setup. Then we have Heroic Adventurer, which is what we're gonna play today, and then there is Legendary Adventurer, so which is the most hardcore way, but also kind of the most intended way probably to play the game. So Legendary mode would be what you see right now. This would be your starting situation. Since we're playing in Heroic mode, we're gonna get 1 extra health immediately, so I'm going to place a 1 here and gain 1 extra health. Remember, whenever you gain a health, you place a health chip behind or under your health stack. And you're also gonna get a training point. Now, the first training point I'm going to deck for patches is going to be an attack. Remember, when you want to train attack, you need to roll an amount of attack dice equal to your attack stat currently, so in this case 1. And if you get a bone, your training is unsuccessful, but if you get something different from a bone, your training attempt will be successful and you're successfully able to train attack. So this will be our starting situation, and now we can start with our first day. Now, just so you know, this would be the day counter, okay? And this is just a chip on a card. As you can see, it's very loose and I don't like using this. So I will instead use a die to signal that, and I will also use a die to signal progress on the baddie card. Speaking of which, I'm going to remove the baddie chip and the baddie die from the screen right now, just because they're not useful until we actually face the Tyrant. Now, I'm not going to explain you the Tyrant encounter, but just so you know, you're allowed to look at the Tyrant encounter before facing the actual Tyrant, so at the beginning of the game, so that you can prepare accordingly. But just so you know, I will build my Gearloc to be ready to face Nom. So let's start with our first day. We increase the day counter, and now we draw our first encounter. As you can see, this is our special encounter, and it has a 1, which means this is always going to be our first encounter, first day encounter. Now, there are expansions that allow you to have options for sets of initial encounters, specifically the expansion Age of Tyranny, and I'm going to be playing with these alternative first 3 encounters in future videos. For now, we're just gonna play the basic ones. Special encounter, Living Oberdar. Only 12 hours till dawn and the sand of ceremony that will no doubt change the lives of every remaining Gearloc and likely every life in the lore. Weapons and supplies are ready to go, but the night is young and adrenaline fills the veins. It's clear no sleep will be had tonight. There are sure to be some shady peddlers in dark alleys ready to deal in loot. Then again, some last minute training could pay a nice dividend by morning. So what to do? Now we flip it and we see we're gonna have 2 peaceful choices. The first one is squeeze in some last minute self-improvement and you're gonna get 2 training points. The second is shake down a shady peddler. Each Gearloc in party may draw 2 loot and choose 1 to keep. So 1 training point and then 1 loot where you're actually gonna be able to draw 2 loot and choose 1 to keep. No matter what, you're gonna get 1 progress point. So in this case, there's no way to fail this encounter, which is great, isn't it? And my choice in this case is almost always to actually do some training points. Because I feel like training points, first of all, are more fun, but also more useful than loot. So I'm gonna choose the first option, and the first thing I'm gonna do is to get progress. And I'm gonna track progress with a die on the Nom card. So we are at 1 of 6 progress. And then I'm going to get 2 training points. The first training point, I'm gonna use it to increase my dexterity. Remember, to increase dexterity, you don't need to test anything, you just increase it, so that we have a nice pool of dice to start our combats with. And my second training point is going to be used by getting toxins. And I can do that because the toxins skill has a star, so I can start from that one. So I'm going to show you the toxins die from here because it's green and my green screen would cancel it out. But basically it has 1 side with 2 bones, actually 2 sides with 2 bones, and then the other sides are gonna be able to let us apply poison on the baddies. And there are 3 options. There is 1 side with 1 poison, 2 sides with a 2 poison, and 1 side with a 3 poison, which is clearly what we're aiming for. How poison is gonna work, we're gonna discuss once we fight our first baddies. But just keep in mind, this is what our toxins die does. Okay, now we go into the recovery phase. Of course, I don't need to search for better loot because I don't have any loot. And of course, I don't need to recover health because I'm at maximum health. So I'm gonna use my individual option to scout the area. I don't have to do lockpicking or loot trading, obviously. I have nothing of these options that I can actually take, but I can scout. I got a 2, which means I can only look at a maximum of a 1 point baddie. And that's what I'm gonna do anyways, because probably we're gonna face a 1 point baddie. So this is going to be our first 1 point baddie, and it's going to be a Kobold Tracker. So now let's talk a little bit of the anatomy of a baddie. Here you have the amount of health that the baddie has, and this is the initiative of the baddie. The higher the initiative, the faster the baddie is gonna act during a combat round. We're gonna see this later in practice, but just so you know, that's how it works. Then the baddie is a ranged baddie, which means when it's gonna spawn in one of the ranged positions, and all the ranged baddies or gearlocs can attack whoever on the battle mat. This is the type of baddie, and it's a scales baddie. It doesn't really matter for now, but it mattered for the setup. Remember, we only took these 3 types of baddies, and this is the 3rd type. This icon here is gonna tell you who the baddie is gonna attack. That icon means that the baddie is gonna target one gearloc, and if there are more gearlocs, it's gonna choose the weakest one. Now let's talk about the skills Hardy and Compound. Now I have this very handy baddie skills reference, and you can see Compound that says this unit's attack stat is equal to the current round number, to a maximum of 5. That symbol on the right means that if we're over the 5th round, it's gonna be still 5. And that is the reason why we have an X here, because usually in that corner is gonna tell you how many attack dice the baddie is gonna roll. In this case it's an X because it depends on the round number. The second skill is Hardy, which means any turn this unit loses HP, including from true damage, total HP loss is reduced to 1. So it doesn't matter if you're dealing 15 damage to this baddie, he's only gonna be able to take only 1 damage per turn. Keep in mind, not per combat round, but per turn. So if you were multiple gearlocs, each gearloc on each turn and each attack is gonna be able to deal maximum 1 damage to this baddie. Now we need to choose if we want to put this baddie at the bottom of the stack or keep it on the top. And I think I'm gonna keep it on the top. I don't think this is too much of a threat right now, especially because we have our poison dice that is gonna help us get around the Hardy keyword, and you're gonna see how. So I'm just gonna keep it on the top. And when I put them on the top, I'm gonna place them here so that you're gonna actually see the queue that we scouted there. Okay, day 1 is done, let's go to day 2. So we increase the day counter and we draw a new encounter. Special encounter, hardly out the gate. 15 steps into the journey, 15 steps, and already a gearloc boot is struck through by an arrow. Teeth are clenched, and a painful tug is made while looking around in embarrassment. Yow! Now sufficiently ticked, it's time to return the favor to the ominous figures at the edge of the woods. A commotion breaks out atop the city wall, interrupting all thoughts. Guards have now spotted the brazen intruders and are notching their arrows. Their help is at the ready. Like it or not, this adventure is underway. As you see, this is the second special encounter for day 2, and we're gonna flip it, and we're gonna have 2 combat choices. This is going to be our first combat. Choice 1. Call the guards for help. Baddie queue, baddie points. What baddie queue, baddie points means is that you're gonna create a queue of baddies depending on the baddie points. The baddie points is a number that is computed by multiplying the number of the day that you're in, so in this case 2, by the amount of gearloc in play, so in this case 1. So you multiply 2, multiplied by 1, and it's a 2. So our baddie queue is going to be created from a baddie points of 2. Which means in this case our queue is gonna have 2 level 1 baddies, because that creates a level 2. If the baddie points would have been something like 7, you would have first added a level 5 baddie on top of the queue and then 2 level 1 baddies after that. You don't take 7 level 1 baddies. So you always take the highest possible value to fill up the queue. Then it says, at the start of each round, arrows from the wall deal 1 true damage to each baddie. Recommended for first time adventurers. So this is basically gonna help you kill the baddies. The second option is, it's time to show Obendar what gearlocs are made of. When there is green text, is usually flavor text. With Obendar watching, you feel an extra shot of adrenaline as you prepare for an unassisted battle. Baddie queue, baddie points. So we already discussed that. And then there is a blue text at the bottom, which is usually special rules for this encounter. After either choice, if battle is lost, place this encounter back on the top of your encounter deck. Which means if we don't succeed at these, we're gonna have to do it again and again and again until we actually succeed, but the day counter is gonna keep on going on. So our baddie queue is gonna get more full. So if we're successful in this encounter, we're gonna get 1 progress point, 1 training point, and 1 loot for each gearloc. So in this case, 1 loot. Of course, the first choice is easier, so it doesn't give you an additional benefit, but the second choice is gonna give you an additional training point. I'm going to be choosing the second option so that I have potential of winning 2 training points. So that's what we're going to do. Let's go into battle setup. So when you set up the battle, you take, first of all, the baddies that you need to take and create the queue. So the queue is going to be composed by our scouted 1 level baddie and 1 at the bottom of the queue. And this is going to be our battle queue. This can be removed because it was there from before. So in this case, our first baddie is a ranged baddie. So what you do is take the first chip, the chip number 1, you place it on the bottom of the baddie, and then you take a number of health chips and you place them under the blue chip. So in this case, 2. So I take 2 health and I place them under this baddie. Then you place the baddie on the correspondent spot of that number. So when you have a 1 chip, which means the first baddie in the queue, you're gonna place it here if it's a melee or here if it's ranged. So I'm gonna place it here because this is a ranged baddie. Then you take the initiative die corresponding to the 1 and you select the number of initiative of that baddie, which is in this case is 6, and you place it here on the initiative meter. Then you do the same with the second baddie. So let's reveal the second baddie and see who do we have to fight. And in this case, we have a Orc Scout. He's gonna have 3 health, an initiative of 4. He's gonna roll 1 attack die each combat turn. He's also a ranged enemy. He's gonna target 1 Gearloc and he's gonna be the weakest. By the way, weakest means the one with the least amount of health. And it has the raiding skill. Let's read what raiding means. Raiding means this unit gains 1 extra attack die for every other orc type baddie on the battle mat. In this case, we only have 1 orc type baddie, so it's not gonna roll any extra attack die. So we got lucky. So now we're gonna do the same we did for our first baddie. We take the number 2 chip, we placed it under our baddie, we take the amount of health that is needed for this baddie, which in this case is 3, we place it under, we place the baddie on the correspondent position on the battle mat, in this case is ranged baddie 2, and we take the initiative die, we set up to its initiative value, which in this case is 4, and we place it correspondingly on the ini meter. Since it is a 4, it's gonna go under the 6. Now it is time to place our Gearloc onto the mat. And the first thing we do is rolling the initiative die for our patches, and he's going to have an initiative of 4, which means he can choose to go either before or after the second baddie. In this case, we're gonna go before, clearly, because we want to act as fast as possible. And this is going to be our initiative order. Then we place patches somewhere on the mat, and we clearly want to place ourselves either here or here. Remember, we can only use one of these 4 spots because these are the melee spots. And I think I want to go here because I want to attack the Kobold Tracker first, because he's gonna be able to use more and more attack dice each round, so I want to kill it first. And now we're ready for the battle. So we're gonna start with the Kobold Tracker going first, and what we do is slide his number here, and he's gonna attack with 1 die because we are in round 1, and the number of the round is gonna be here, and it always needs to be reset to 1 at the beginning of the combat. So he's gonna roll 1 attack die against us, and he's gonna deal us 1 damage because it rolled a 1. So what we do is losing a health, and that's all for the Kobold Tracker turn. Remember, he doesn't need to move because he's ranged, so he can attack me from wherever. Now it is my turn, and the first thing we do is using our innate. So we're gonna recover 1 health thanks to Patch's innate ability. So we get back the health we just lost. We can never go above our health maximum. So we lost 1, we gained 1. But if we were a maximum, we could not exceed that maximum. Then we're gonna have to spend 1 dexterity to move towards the Kobold Tracker to be able to attack him because we are melee Gearlocs. And then we have 2 dexterity left. And we need to choose what we want to roll for our dexterity. I think what I'm going to roll is going to be my Toxins die and 1 attack die against the Kobold Tracker, obviously, because he's the only one that I can attack. So let's roll. And what we got was 1 attack and 1 poison die. So the first attack goes through. Remember, he's hardy. So each turn, so during this turn, he can only lose maximum 1 health. And he's gonna lose 1 health because of my attack. I'm gonna apply this attack die, and he's gonna lose 1 health, bringing him down to 1 health left. Then I rolled the 1 poison die. It's not amazing having only 1 poison, but it's gonna be enough to kill our Kobold Tracker on its turn. When you roll these kill dice, you are never forced to actually apply them. You can choose to not apply them, place them back on your mat, and reroll them on a future turn to hope for a better result. Unless specified by the die that that result has to be used. In this case, I'm actually gonna use this 1 poison, and this 1 toxins die is gonna allow me to place 1 poison status die on our enemy. This status die, in this case, it is a poison die, and it has a 1 that now it's green, so you can't see it. Everything is green in this game, I'm so sorry. And we're gonna see when this triggers at the beginning of its turn what it's gonna do. But for now, I'm just gonna place a status die on him, and this die, remember, it is exhausted. I'm gonna place the exhausted dice on here, which means they're not available to be rolled anymore. Now my turn is over, it is time for the Orc Scout to go next. What I didn't say is that each baddie can move up to 2 spaces during their turn. Now the Orc Raiding doesn't need to move because it's ranged, so he can attack me from there. But in case the Orc Raiding would have been a melee enemy, he would have had to move next to me to actually attack me. Remember, diagonals are not adjacency. The Orc Raiding rolls only 1 attack die, so he's gonna roll 1 attack against me, and he rolls a bone, which means he misses. That's great. So that's it for the first combat round. We go into the second combat round, and we start with our Kobold Tracker. Now, at the start of the turn, the poison is gonna trigger. Now, the poison is true damage, first of all, which is different from normal damage, and this is gonna be important in the future. But the first thing that happens is that the baddie is gonna lose an amount of health equal to the value of the poison die. In this case, it's only a 1, so he's only gonna lose 1 health. But if the die were a 3, theoretically the baddie would have lost 3 health. In this case, this is a hardy baddie, so even if he had a 3, he would only lose 1 because of his special skill of being hardy. After that, you roll down the die. So let's suppose this was a 3. Our baddie, suppose this wasn't hardy, it would take 3 damage, true damage, and then roll down the die to a 2 poison. At the beginning of his next turn, he would trigger again, lose 2 health, and roll it down to 1, and so on. Now, this is a hardy baddie, so he would only lose 1 damage each turn, even if it had a 3 or a 2. In this case, it has a 1, so it doesn't really matter that he's hardy. He's only gonna lose 1 health, and once you go to 1, you actually lose the poison die. But it doesn't matter, because he's gonna die, so he's dead. And what you do when a baddie is dead is that you remove all the health chips, you place this baddie in a defeated stack that I'm gonna place off camera, and then you just reset the one with this, and you place this on top. Now it is our turn. We're gonna move next to the Orc Scout, and we're going to roll 2 attack dice against him. Whoa, whoa, that's a 4 damage hit, 2 and a 2. Remember, there is only one side that has a 2 out of 6. So we got super lucky. We're gonna deal 4 damage to this Orc Raiding. He only has 3 health, which means he's defeated. So we remove all his health here. We place him in the defeated stack together with his friend, and we just killed all the baddies, and we successfully won the battle. So we take our patches out of the battle mat. We remove these dice. We remove the initiative die, and we place all the exhausted dice back on the skill mat. We reset the round counter to 1, ready for our next battle. We resolve the encounter, we were successful, so we go into the reward phase. So first of all, we're gonna get the progress point, so we go to 2. And then I'm going to get a loot, so I draw a loot, and it's going to be utility parts. On your turn, unexhaust any 1 die, may include fellow Gearloc dice. This is a single-use loot that is gonna allow you to unexhaust 1 used die. So remember that I said when a die is exhausted, generally you can't use it back for the rest of the combat unless something allows you to actually unexhaust it. Well, this is the case. It's strange, the Delior countryside seems littered with abandoned Gearloc technology. Pickett's journal. So I'm going to place this loot in, this is going to be my loot area. And then I can get 2 training points. And the encounter is gonna be completed. So I'm gonna remove this encounter. And for training points, I am going to get a med kit. I'm going to get 1 dexterity, another dexterity, because dexterity is always good to have. And 1 med kit, which is our first die on the red skill path. The medkit die is pretty easy. It allows you to basically heal instantly for a certain amount set on the die. It has several faces with a 2, 1 face with a 1, and 2 faces with a 3. So I'm just gonna place it on our medkit. By the way, I wanted to show you that each Gearloc has its reference sheet. So as you can see on the right side, when there is the first die is a medkit, and it's gonna show you that it has 1 face with a 1, 3 faces with a 2, 2 faces with a 3. Also, if you look at the symbol of the medkit faces, on the right side in the dice icon key, the second row is gonna tell you heal. In between parentheses there is an I, which means this is an instant die, which means you need to use it when you roll it. And it's gonna tell you heal any Gearloc for number of HP, which is hit points. On this sheet you have all the possible skill dice with all the explanation of all the skills on the right side. And as you can see, what we used before was the poison jar. It also is an instant die, and it says place a number poison effect die on your target, which is exactly what we did with the kobold. Something else I want to show you is that there is a legend for all the letters that are next to the type of face of the die. So on the bottom right you can see that there are A dice that are placed in an active slot that we're gonna see later, AA, which is a allies active slot, BP, which means backup plan, which is where we place our bones. Then there is CTR, which is a counter. I don't think we're gonna use counters in this game, but we're gonna for sure see them in other games. Then there is I, which is the most common, used instantly. And then there is L, which is placed in lock slot. That is another different kind of slot that we're gonna see probably later. And you also have a whole page with all the backup plan breakdown, where it explains what the backup plan for patches does. It has a lot of explanation, so critical patches details, some extra details. And on the right you also have like some build strategy, some tips on how to build your Gearloc, and then there is the innate and innate +1 explanation and some effect dice definition. So as you remember, we placed the poison effect die, and here is gonna tell you what the poison effect does, even though it's already written in the rulebook. So this unit takes the damage equal to the effect die number at the start of this turn, and after applying damage, reduce effect die by 1. So our reward phase is completed, and now we go into the recovery phase. So first of all, we don't have anything to lockpick, so we're gonna skip that. We go into our individual choices, and I don't need to heal because I'm at maximum health. I don't wanna look for better loot because I really like the utility parts. So I'm just gonna scout the area once again. Rolling a 1 means that I can only look at a 1-point baddie, and this baddie is going to be another orc. This is a 3 health, 3 initiative orc peon, and he's a melee. As you can see from this symbol, this is a new symbol that we didn't see before. He's gonna target the weakest Gearloc. He's gonna roll 1 attack die, and he is rage 1. Rage 1 means that if this baddie is not at full health, so he's not at 3 health, he's gonna roll an extra attack die. If it was rage 2, he would roll 2 extra attack dice, and so on. I think it's pretty fine, so I'm just gonna keep it at the top. So I'm just reorganized a little the area. You don't really need to see the chips with 1, 2, 3, and 4 for the baddie combats. This is going to be the area where we place our scouted baddies, and the rest you already know. Okay, third day, so we increase the counter, day counter, and we read the third encounter card. Special encounter, crossing the Seaburn. The Seaburn River, a glistening vein of trade running the length of Deleor, playful beacons as it shimmers in the daylight up ahead. But with so few bridges in these parts, this crossing is an obvious spot for enemy scouts and traps. A journey of this importance leaves only 2 options. Tucking the ears and trying to blend in is risky but efficient. A boat at dusk carries less chance of discovery but requires business with the Monor, a trading syndicate with their own set of drawbacks. So we have two choices, they're both peaceful, and we have the first one that says, tuck your ears and walk like a commoner. Roll a d6 for each Gearloc in party. On any 1 to 2, your party is spotted. Find the first Tyrant encounter in your deck and place it on top. Shuffle the remaining cards and keep them underneath. Encounter success is achieved no matter the outcome. This option is gonna give us 1 extra progress point and 1 extra training point. The second option is hire the Molnor, and this option is gonna give us 1 trove loot. And it says the Molnor are surprisingly easy to work with. Not only do they drop us safely on the east bank of the river under the cover of darkness, they also offer a trove loot. Maybe our success is good for business? Shuffle the special encounter Molnor traders into your encounter deck. So there are some special encounters that have a specific name, and in this case this is gonna allow you to shuffle this special encounter specifically into the encounter deck. No matter what, we're gonna get 1 progress point from this card. Now I'm gonna choose the first option because I really want the extra progress point and the extra training point. And it says roll a d6 for each Gearloc in party. So I'm gonna roll a d6 and hope not to roll a 1 or 2. I rolled a 1. Well, that's unfortunate. Remember that it says find the first Tyrant encounter in your deck and place it on top. Usually Tyrant encounters are a little bit tougher than normal encounters, and remember Tyrant encounters are the encounters that are tied to our special Tyrant. So I'm gonna have to take the Tyrant encounter, we only have 1 with Nom, and place it on top of the encounter deck. So we know that our next encounter is gonna be the Tyrant encounter. Now that that's done, we can go to the reward phase. I'm gonna get 2 progress points, so I go to 4, and we can spend our training point. So I think the training point, I'm going to spend it on attack. So I'm gonna try to train attacks. This means I need to roll 2 attack dice and hope for no bones. No bones, so I'm gonna get an extra attack. I go to 2 attack, and that was my training point spent. We go into recovery phase. There's nothing to do except scouting, so that's what I'm gonna do. I get a 5, so I can look at a 5-point baddie if I want to. Remember, 4 and 5 allows you to look at a 5-point baddie and a 6 at a 20-point baddie. So I think I'm going to look at a 5-point baddie because I know there are some encounters in solo that basically play some 5-point baddie in the queue. So I'm going to look at this 5-point baddie, and it's going to be a Orc Rager. He's a melee, he's gonna target only 1 Gearloc and he's gonna be the weakest. Again, we don't care about that, but I want you to understand these symbols. He's gonna have 5 health, 3 initiative, he's gonna roll 2 attack dice, and he has raiding that we already saw, which means that if there are other orcs on the battle mat, he's gonna get 1 extra attack die, but he also has rage 2, which means that if he's not at full health, he's gonna be able to roll 2 extra attack dice. Which means this guy can potentially roll up to 5 attack dice each turn, which is very bad, very, very bad. I think I'm gonna still keep it on top because it's not as scary as some other level 5 baddies. So I think I'm just gonna keep it on top here on the 5-point baddie stack. And now we go into our day 3. Pretend to act surprised when we see that this is a Tyrant encounter. So the problem with thick skin. And there he stands, the size of a Gearloc hut, right in the middle of the path. Nom, the troll chieftain, and his cronies are clearly unafraid of leaving the safety of their lair. They are thirsty for blood, and this battle feels premature. That's good for Nom, not so good for the side of the battle line. With what feels like 0 time to prepare, there's got to be a way to delay this encounter. Perhaps fighting aggression with aggression would cause Nom to back off. If not, the crack of Nom's thunderclap will resound throughout Delor this day. So we're gonna see what's behind here, and we have 2 choices. The first one is, this thing doesn't seem so terrifying. Baddie queue, baddie points. Party of 1 to 2 add 2 1-point baddies to the baddie queue. Party of 3-4 add 2 5-point baddies to baddie queue. We would add the 2 1-point baddies to the queue. And then it says place Nom on top of the baddie queue. Nom instantly leaves the battle at the end of round 3, or if his HP reaches 5 or fewer. Other baddies remain and complete the battle. And this would give us 1 extra training, 1 extra progress, actually only one progress because there's no progress on this card, and it's gonna give us a loot. The second choice is gonna be back away slowly. Okay, quickly. Nom chases the party throughout the day and night. Each Gearloc in your party loses 2 HP and must skip recovery phase. Reshuffle this encounter back into the encounter deck, and you're gonna get 1 training point. Now, I think I'm gonna choose the first option, and the reason why is that even if we lose this encounter, at least we remove it from the encounter deck. I don't want to face this encounter again and reshuffle it inside. And I don't think the bad EQ would be that bad in this case, hopefully. So I think I'm going to choose the first option. Okay, so we made it to the very last battle of this video, which I foresee it's gonna be a pretty intense battle since Nom is gonna show up in the battle mat. But I want to take this occasion to remind you that if you like the video so far, feel free to leave a like, subscribe to my channel, and I will be immensely grateful if you decided to do so. And thank you so much. Now let's go straight into the final battle of today. I forgot to increase the day counter, we are on day 4, but since we are on day 4, our baddie queue is going to be composed of 4 1-point baddies. So we're gonna have this one that we scouted plus 3 more at the bottom. Maybe this wasn't a very wise choice now that I think about it. Then a party of 1 to 2 adds 2 1-point baddies to the baddie queue. So we're gonna add 2 more. So we are already at like 6 baddies here, which is scary. And lastly, we need to place Nom at the top of the baddie queue. So Nom is going to be our Tyrant who's gonna join us for this battle. But remember, he's gonna instantly leave the battle at the end of round 3 or if his HP reaches 5 or fewer. I think it is time to have a look at our baddie and talk about him. So this is Nom, our Tyrant, and this is going to be his stats. So he's gonna have 6 health, and remember, we just need to bring him down to 5. Then he's gonna have an initiative of 2, he's gonna roll 1 attack die, 1 defense die, and this black thing that you see next to the defense die, it means that he's gonna roll his special Tyrant die, which is this die here. Now if you see at the bottom, on the left of his name, is gonna have like that 2 feet icon, which means he can move diagonally, and the other icon means that he's melee. The icon on top of his name is gonna mean that he's gonna target the strongest Gearloc on the mat, and his skills are Thick Skin 3 and Recover 1. Now we can learn about these Tyrant skills on the Tyrant card here. We are gonna skip the first part because that's about the encounter we're gonna have when we actually want to kill Nom. But this Tyrant skill says Thick Skin 3. Nom ignores the first 3 damage he would take each turn, does not ignore true damage. And then we have Recover 1. Nom gains 1 HP up to max at the start of its turn. So he's gonna heal every turn, and you need to deal him at least 4 damage in a round to be able to actually damage him, and that's why he only has 6 health, unless it is true damage. And that is also the reason why I'm taking the poison dice, because poison is true damage, which is gonna ignore his thick skin. On the bottom, you're also gonna see the faces of his Tyrant die. He has 2 different faces. It's gonna be Nom. All defense dice are removed from target before applying damage. We haven't seen defense yet, but we're gonna see it probably soon. And then we have Thunderclap face, which says after Nom's attack, knock target to the farthest position away from its current position on the battle mat and deal 1 true damage. So it's just gonna push you away as far as possible from where you are right now. So this is about Nom, and he's going to be at the top of our baddie queue. And yeah, this is what's happening. So I'm going to set up this battle with you for the last time, and then all the other battles are gonna be set up automatically. But this time I want you to see it for one last time. So Nom is going to be the first showing up, and he's going to go to the melee position. He's gonna have 6 health. Then we're gonna have this orc peon. I don't know what is that word. He's also melee, and he's gonna have 3 health. He's gonna go here. I forgot to put the initiative die for the Nom, so it's gonna have a 2. The orc is gonna have a 3, so it's gonna go before Nom. Then our third enemy is going to be a Oh, this is fun. A dragon hatchling. He has 3 health, a 6 initiative, and a 1 attack die. He's a ranged baddie and he has engulf. Engulf means that whenever he deals damage to its target, he also deals 1 damage to all the units, so either baddies or gearlocs adjacent to its target. This guy is a great way to make baddies kill each other, because if he deals damage to you, he's also gonna deal damage to all the baddies adjacent to you, which is amazing, honestly. So it's gonna have 3 health, a 6 initiative, so it's gonna be the first one acting, and he's ranged, so it's gonna go here. And then our 4th baddie on the mat is going to be, oh, we already saw this guy, a Kobold Tracker. So it's gonna have a 2 health, 6 as initiative, so it's gonna go right after the dragon's hatchling. And he's unfortunately also gonna be ranged, so he's gonna go here. Now we have more baddies in the queue, but we are out of baddies available space, so all the other baddies are gonna enter the mat once some of these leave the mat if we survive. So now I need to position patches somewhere on the mat. First of all, actually I'm gonna roll the initiative die for patches. It's gonna have a 3, so it's gonna be positioned here. I mean, I wasn't expecting anything different. And I think I'm going to position myself here. So yeah, that's it. We're ready for our first combat round. Okay, so we can start with our round 1. And the first baddie to act is going to be this dragon hatchling. And the reason why I place myself next to another baddie is that so that this dragon hatchling could actually damage not only me, but also someone adjacent of me. So this orc. The problem with damaging the orc is going to be that the orc has rage, which means if he's not at full health, he's gonna be able to roll more dice. But I hope to get rid of that orc before it actually gets to have its turn. So the dragon hatchling is gonna attack me with 1 die. 2 damage. Okay, that's okay, that's fine. So we're gonna take 2 damage. And also the orc is going to take 2 damage because he's adjacent to us. Now it is time for the Kobold Tracker to go. He's going to attack me with 1 die because we are in round 1. 1. So he's gonna deal me 1 damage. And now it is my turn, and what I'm going to do is to move 1, 2, and I'm going to attack the orc. I have still 2 dexterity, and I think I'm going to roll 1 attack and 1 heal. Not really, because I'm going to heal at the beginning of my turn because I have my recovery innate ability. So I'm at 4, so I'm not sure I want to roll my heal just yet. So I'm gonna place it back. I'm going to roll an attack and 1 defense, and hopefully heal the orc peon. He's gonna be my target. Okay, 1 damage and 1 defense, so I'm gonna place my defense in my active slot. This is the first time we see defense. Whenever you roll defense, you place defense in your active slot. And whenever you take damage, the first damage you're gonna take is gonna be off of your defense. So that's gonna protect me for 1 hit in the future. Now, if it were my turn again, and I already have 1 defense die here, since I only have 1 defense, I cannot roll a defense die because my defense die is already used here. If I wanted to roll 1 defense die, I can, whenever I want to, remove the die from my active slot and actually re-roll it. But it means that I'm gonna lose my defense that is there. So I deal 1 damage to the orc and he's dead. So I'm going to place it on the defeated baddie queue. Defeated baddie stack, actually. It was this one. And now Nom is going to attack. And he's going to attack, he's first gonna move to me, and he's gonna move here. Then he's gonna attack me with 1 attack, 1 defense, and his Tyrant die. Okay, so first of all, he's going to get his defense. Then he's going to use his Tyrant ability, and this symbol here means that he's gonna remove my defense die. So unfortunately, this is not gonna protect me. And now it's gonna deal me 1 damage. So I am down to 3 health. Already, already. Now we are in round 2, and at the end of the round a new baddie enters the battle mat, because we have still baddies in the baddie queue. So we're gonna have this Troll Brute. He has 3 health, 1 of initiative, but the initiative really doesn't matter, because whenever new baddie come in, they're always gonna come in at the bottom of the queue. He's gonna roll 1 attack, 1 defense. He has Thick Skin 1, we already know what Thick Skin means, he's gonna ignore the first damage every turn. He has Careless as a backup plan. Whenever you see that bone icon under a skill, it means that whenever he rolls bones, he has that skill active, and that means that whenever he rolls bones, he's actually gonna damage himself. He's a melee, and he's gonna target the strongest Gearloc, so he's gonna have the number 2 chip and 3 health. And the important thing is that since the 2 melee spot is occupied, he's gonna try and move to the 3 melee spot, which is free, so he's gonna go there. Now it's the beginning of a new round, and the dragon hatchling is actually gonna attack me with 1 attack die. I hope I don't die. 1 damage. Okay, so I take 1 damage, and all adjacent targets also take 1 damage. Now, the hardy guy is gonna take a damage without no problem, because he can only take 1, but he's gonna take at least 1. And Nom has Thick Skin, but Thick Skin is after the defense, so he's gonna lose his defense first, and then Thick Skin only applies after the enemy has no more defense left. So he did the right damage to other people, that's cool. Now, unfortunately, we're probably gonna die, because now the Kobold Tracker is going to attack me with 2 attack dice, so hopefully he's gonna roll at least a bone, and we're not gonna die, but I don't have high hopes for that. Well, he rolled a 3, so we're dead. We're dead. And when that happens, it means that we lose the encounter, and we basically empty the battle mat and reset everything. So unfortunately, we did not complete these encounters, so we don't get any reward in the reward phase, and we're gonna skip to the recovery and rest phase, and we are forced to choose the option of recovering all health, because we are defeated, and that's what I'm going to do. Okay, so this completes our first part of this journey. Unfortunately, with a burning defeat, Nom entered the battle mat and crushed us. It wasn't really Nom, it was kinda all the baddies that crushed us. But let's see if we are able to take our revenge in the second part of this video. You will be able to find the second part to this video either at the end of this video or in the description below, where I will leave a link if it's already out. Until then, thank you so much for watching, and ciao ciao!